and welcome to the third in a series of videos where we break down our annual State of Selling to Schools report to help guide you through some of our insights on what they might mean for your business. Lance and I have surveyed nearly 6,000 teachers from across the UK. The result is a free downloadable 40-page report that combines insights into schools' problems and priorities for the year ahead and draws comparisons with previous surveys. Our deep analysis draws new conclusions about selling to schools, all to help you shape your marketing strategy, solve schools' problems, and make more sales.
This video focuses on Chapter 3 of the report, Connecting with Schools. We asked two questions about the most convenient time for educators to connect with suppliers and the notice time educators need to consider an offer from suppliers. We begin with, when is the most convenient time for you to connect with an education supplier?
And as with last time, we have one kind of clear-cut answer. Last week it was emails. This week it's after school.
Yeah.
The best time for you to connect with an educator is after school. And what we mean by that is the period of time after lessons are finished, between about 2:30 and 4:30, depending on when the school finishes, where teachers are now focusing on meetings, admin tasks, marking, planning for the next day, that sort of thing, or running groups. Obviously, if they're running a group, they're less likely to be able to engage, but that's that's fine. But it depends when the school day ends. The things that were kind of most popular in that time of day were things like training, webinars, or demos, and they kind of came out between 49.1%, 54.8%. It's when you have time as a teacher to reflect on your day, what you've done, and what you're going to, where you want to take your teaching, new ideas or tools that you can think about, and how to use them. Communications was a bit lower down, 44 to 45.2%, and we're talking via phone calls, video calls, email and web chat. Interestingly, the phone call side of things does kind of contradict what we were talking about last time. Last week it was kind of avoid phone calls really, because teachers aren't that keen on them. They kind of came up as unlikely or never as options last week. But this week, if you can kind of pin down a time, then a teacher will happily do a phone call in that after school slot. About 44% of teachers said they were happy to do a phone call then, because they know when it's going to be. There's a fixed time. They're not having to worry about things getting in the way.
Then I'd rather it be at that time if you do have to call me.
Yeah, exactly right. Email and web chat was kind of a bit more variable, generally readily more available, particularly before school, and a lot of people said any time for that, which you can translate as a time to suit them. For instance, PPA time, non-contact time. You focused on EdTech.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, in terms of like when is it convenient to contact them about EdTech demos? 51.4% overall said after school. So there's that after school again. This is all of our usual suspects as well. That's the classroom teachers, the heads of department, the senior leaders, everyone really in the school who's involved in the education side of things. And they're quite often this will be like a small group after school in a department meeting, perhaps, let's say, or maybe it's an e-learning team that's looking to stay ahead of the game and roll out some new ideas to the rest of the school. And they'll probably quite often be focusing on the EdTech that's to do with like the preparation, delivery, and review of content in classes. Also, maybe make it how to make some of that content more engaging and accessible as well. But that's the sort of thing that it would be a convenient thing for them to look at after school. Whereas for other people that respond to our survey, such as the office staff, we had very different results. Only 22.6% said after school. And I mean, maybe for office staff, when you say after school, they might be thinking after, when they're supposed to be going home. So that would make sense. But we also had lots of nevers as well. 28.3% of office staff said they'd never like to be contacted.
So, what do you think? I mean, during the pandemic, the EdTech was kind of fast-tracked. It had to be, because you had all this homeschooling. Do you think it's because the office staff, a lot of that technology that they're using has been used before, and that's kind of they're used to it, and it's the teachers that are kind of learning more?
Yeah, I think obviously it will vary among individuals, but I think it's to do with more, maybe they see what they're doing as communications. But as we know, we've both got, like we said before, we've both got children in primary school, and the office staff will be running some of the means of communication around that, email notifications to parents, attendance, even payments and things like that. Office staff will be involved in those things. So maybe it's also about whether or not they see that as EdTech, or whether they just see that as general communications as well.
Okay. Moving on to the second question, how much notice do education suppliers need to give?
Yeah, so this is a crucial one around timing and how long it takes people to consider these offers. And 1 to 3 months notice is most popular. It comes out quite strongly across all the options, but this is especially the case for training workshops, assemblies, those sorts of in-person offers that people need to consider. So when it comes to things like that, they need time to teachers and educators will need time to process, when is it going to happen in their calendar if they're planning ahead for it in a few months in advance. They might need to schedule a time, a location for it to occur if it's a workshop or assembly, potentially arranging cover of staff. Just logistical considerations that will take a few months to pan out and to work out now.
And there's quite a lot of thematic stuff when it comes to primary schools assembly. So I know my daughter's doing kind of Stone Age and that sort of thing at the moment. So they might get a specialist in.
Yeah.
It might be kind of of specific for that.
Absolutely. So when it comes to assemblies, I mean, primary schools are a good example. Like if you're a primary school that has your end of week assembly, for instance, it might be quite straightforward to bring in an outside provider and for them to speak at an assembly. That might be relatively straightforward to organise. But if it's a workshop or a more interactive assembly, for instance, or training, you're going to want to consider room, space for equipment, and things like that.
I guess also workshops tend to happen aside from the normal timetable, so you might have to kind of get permission to hold. The teachers have to kind of go through more hurdles to get a workshop organised than perhaps an assembly, which might have a designated time slot.
Yeah, exactly. So if it's not taking place during that hour or half hour you have in the week for that,
things get a lot more complicated.
then that involves it as well. But we know at the moment, like, well-being workshops and training is very popular, and particularly like physical activities that support well-being, because there's research out there that says that physical activity boosts the release of positive chemicals among students, and then not only during the session but afterwards that can lead to increased focus. We're talking about things like yoga, we're talking about different sorts of sports and games, dance, creative arts, singing, any form of workshop and designed to encourage movement, even like movement with mass, for instance, which is trying to get people to look at things in a more creative way. But the long and short of it is, for those sorts of workshops, that they need space and they need room for equipment. So that's going to take a little bit longer to consider that. If you're a multi-academy trust and you're in charge of like all of year 7 and 8, and you want to organize well-being workshops using yoga, for instance, and you need space for their equipment, then it's going to take a bit longer than one primary school having in one guest speaker who doesn't need any equipment. But it is worth bearing in mind this is still only 1 to 3 months. It's still a relatively short period.
It surprises me a little bit, because I know that teachers you have to, so many schools, you have to kind of submit to a school calendar way in advance, sometimes almost a year ahead. But it's interesting that 1 to 3 months seems decent.
And I suppose as well, to take that example, you might have decided earlier upon the year that you do want to have a wellbeing workshop in term 3, for instance, but then when it comes to the actual like organising of that, you're not going to organise it too close to the time when you've received those offers from those providers. And when it also comes to organising a school as well, it is in the school. So the risk assessment is more straightforward. There's less to have to figure out there, as opposed to if you're going somewhere externally.
Which I'm about to talk about, trips. And that was the area where teachers need a bit more time. So you need more notice. So 45.7% combined went for 4 to 6 months, 7 to 12 months, or even over a year to plan a trip. Now, a trip can fall under different categories. You could have a trip down the road to the park. You could have a trip to the local museum. Those are slightly less headachy, for want of a better word. You still have to do the risk assessment. You still have to, know your venue. You have to know your routes. You have to have everything timed. You have to have enough helpers, so that your staff ratios are up to scratch. We're thinking probably with these longer time frames about overnight stays, foreign trips, music tours, history field trips, things like that, geography field trips, I should say, D&V expeditions, those sorts of things. They take that much longer to plan. You need to get all the permissions. You need to raise funds. More of the cost of these trips fall onto the parents. I remember when I was 13, going on a sponsored walk to help pay for me to be able to go on a music trip, so that that these things kind of stick in the memory. You need to recce where you're going. That could end up being a nice trip to France during half term, but it might be a rushed kind of quick. We need to go and find out where we're going to go. We need to go and see this. We're doing a field trip on the Battle of the Somme or something. We need to go and visit and make sure that we know where we're going. You need to plan meals. There's so much going into a trip like that, so it does need time. This is where actually the businesses could come in and help with things like risk assessment templates, planning documents, anything that can help ease the workload on the teaching staff and make the idea of organising a trip more
Straightforward.
and therefore more appealing,
Yeah.
then you can get those things off the ground
It's going to be a big
bit
win.
better. Yeah. So that's kind of where we need to kind of think a bit more time. What do we have that requires a bit less time?
Oh, well, that's going back into your digital content usually. So if you're providing a free webinar, if you're doing those EdTech demos, it's generally going to need a lot less time for that to be considered, for it to be planned. You know, teachers are pretty up to date on using like video call technology, or organizing that via projector for a meeting. So, you know, if there is something you're interested in, you can jump in on that pretty much straight away. The accessibility and delivery of that, you know, it's just more efficient. You know, if you're trying to jump in on a device to watch a video call together, it's a much simpler thing to do. And if you think about what would be the scenario where educators would be doing that, it could be as we know from going online, teachers are constantly trying to keep ahead of the game. Most teachers want to have one eye on the future, how they can improve their practice. So, you know, ChatGPT is very popular as a discussion point online for good and bad reasons at the moment. But you know, it could be like a maths department, for instance, that are looking to improve the digital side of their delivery of, say, figuring out algebraic equations, and if do they want to talk about with an edtech company how to use devices to show their workings out, which you can traditionally really only do on pen and paper.
This is quite a good time to actually bring up our desktop calendar, because, you know, if you're looking at say a revision resource, if you've got our desktop calendar, you can see clearly that if it's April and you want to get this revision resource out, that's okay. You might just get it in time, but it's going to cut it fine. If you're thinking 4 to 6 weeks, 1 to 3 months, you really want to be looking at kind of January, February to get that resource out there, so that the teachers can assimilate it, get used to using it, and then use it with their students, or even earlier if it's part of the actual teaching tool. So do have a look at our desktop calendar to help you keep up to date with events and the like.
Yeah, and things like that will help when it comes to even the digital considerations. Figuring out for teachers, you know, practical things like, do we have the devices with our students where they can do this, or do we need to invest in that sort of purchase as well?
That's a longer term thing.
Exactly. So, you know, something that was, you know, quite a short term could become a bigger thing, and we can see that sharp contrast in the graph as well between things that are generally delivered digitally versus the, you know, the TRIPs and the external providers.
We've explored when best to connect with educators and how much time they need to consider different offers. We'll be exploring what we discovered about well-being in schools and how educators view EdTech as we continue to delve deeper into our State of Selling to Schools report for 2023.
Of course, our software campus comes with all of our data and insights baked in, so you can really focus in on the views that impact your targeted campaigns when making your Selling to Schools decisions. Check out our website to see how you can get in touch with our team today.
From the two of us, goodbye for now.